Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. And the question is, are we in a spiritual battle? Are we in a battle for the fate of mankind? Are we in a battle of dark versus light, of good versus evil? Are we in a battle with the stakes being higher than we ever imagined? The question is, does the enemy have a say in these battles? In every battle, there is pain. There is difficulties. And the entire premise of this show since inception has been to establish the moral high ground, to bring intellectual arguments that through a process of debate and inquiry, and to establish the moral high ground and to win this battle through the use of ideas. And I think we've done that because we've brought on some of the brightest minds in the local area, and we've brought on people that are political activists, that are freedom fighters, that are fighting to save us from this dark abyss that we are heading down, to restore our republic to what it once was. But again, in all battles, the enemy has a say in all battles. And I want to share with you something that happened on this show over the course of just 3 weeks. That I think what it does is it demonstrates that we are in a battle of dark versus evil, of good versus light. And we had a number of guests on this show over the course of 3 weeks that all experienced one form of personal tragedy or another. And the first guest I'm going to talk about is a local businessman, and he was coming to the show, and what he did is he called and he said, "Hey, listen, I want to bring my elderly mother on the show, and I want to bring her on the show, and she'll just sit as a guest in the audience to watch her son on the show." And what happened is, on the way to the show, she suffered a massive heart attack and passed away, and it was very tragic. And of course, he couldn't be on the show, but we stayed in touch with him through that very difficult time, and he experienced quite a loss of someone close to him. The next week on the show, we had another guest, and after the show was over, the guest went home, and he took an everyday pain medication, and he had a seriously adverse reaction to it with internal damage. And it brought him to the brink. He was in critical condition for weeks. And of course, we stayed in touch with him during that time. And it was a traumatic event for him. And finally, we had a third guest on. This is all in less than a month. And after the show was over, that guest, his family was subject to a vicious dog attack. And a dog attack where all of his family members were okay. But they did lose their family pet in that attack. And so again, so these people are on the show, and then 1 week after another, I'm getting these phone calls where they're sharing these personal tragedies. And to me, it becomes clear that yes, we are in a battle of dark versus light. We are in a battle of good versus evil. We're in a battle of ideas, and the enemy has a say in all battles. And, by the grace of God, all of those men, they survived their ordeals with trauma. And but these men, the men that come on the show, they are freedom fighters. Yes, the enemy has a say in all battles, but these men get back up, and they're freedom fighters. And within a short time, they're calling me back, and they're talking about their next activist event, their next campaign for freedom, the next issue that they're taking on to save the country. But the point is that we are in something bigger than what we really imagine, and it's time for everyone to take note of that. We are in a situation where the fate of mankind rests on our actions, on whether or not we sit on the couch or we get in this political battle and we begin fighting peacefully through political activism to take back our country, to restore it to what it once was, to restore morality in our society and end this decay that we can see on every street corner. And I want to say that every man that I talked about who was on the show, those men are warriors, and they're back on the front lines going and fighting for the country. But I think it's time that we all step up and take a stake in these times that we are in. So I wanted to share that personal story of that short experience that happened on our show. I think it's very clear the stakes of what we're in. But now I want to turn our attention to the Texas Democrats, because we're witnessing an implosion of the Texas Democrat Party. They nominated a president who is obviously incompetent. Your Texas Democrats overwhelmingly supported and celebrated a man that is a national embarrassment, a man that has been forced to step down due to a lack of cognitive abilities. There is nothing that justifies this man being put in office. And the question is, do Texas Democrats have your best interests in mind, putting forth a fool that is Joe Biden and then supporting him vociferously? That's the question. Shouldn't they be putting forward someone their best and brightest? No, they're putting together someone politically connected, because they are all political animals. And to make my point, I'm going to give you a few quotes of your local Texas Democrats and how, in spite of where the rest of the world sees Joe Biden as an embarrassment, they stand behind him. Because to the Texas Democrats, it's Democrats first, it's Americans second. I'm going to give you a quote right now, and this quote is from Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher on Joe Biden. Quote, President Biden has been an extraordinary president, and his historic accomplishments will deliver meaningful results for Americans for generations to come. Unquote, Lizzie Fletcher, United States Congresswoman for the 7th Congressional District. So when she talks about these accomplishments that are for generations to come, is she talking about hyperinflation, where Americans for the first time in our lifetime are adding up their grocery store receipts and comparing them to what they were 4 years ago? And they're seeing sometimes more than a 100% increase in their everyday grocery items? Is that what she's talking about? Or is she talking about the fact that home mortgages have increased more than 40% in just 4 years? And we're at a point now where our elderly, where our grandmas and grandpas, where they can no longer, their houses are being appraised, and they can no longer afford the tax values on these new appraisals because of hyperinflation, and they're being forced out of their homes. They're being forced into the streets, or they're being forced to go live with their children. And so here we are watching the American people go into a third world status where we're having multiple generations of people live in one household. Is that what Lizzie Fletcher's talking about when she talks about the foundational change that Joe Biden's brought to us for generations to come, and how we should all be grateful for Joe Biden? I'm going to move on now to another quote. I'm going to talk about Rodney Ellis. And Rodney Ellis is your Harris County Commissioner for Precinct 1. And many refer to him as the consigliere of Harris County, because he knows where all the funds go. And that's what Democrats are about. They're about knowing where the funding goes. They'll say whatever they need to say to get you to vote for them, but for them, it's all about knowing where the funding goes. And this is Rodney Ellis talking about Joe Biden. Quote, "Thank you, President Biden, for your decades of service to our country. Your love of America has been a steady hand guiding us," unquote. When he says that, is he referring to the border? The border, where our border is coming unraveled, where we have 130,000 fighting age men coming over the border, oftentimes with a trafficked victim in tow? Is that what he's talking about? So you could go today to the on-ramp to the HOV lane on 59 South at the West Belfort entry, okay? I want you to go there. And when you go there, what you'll see homeless people sitting in their own feces, okay? That's what you'll see on our streets. You'll see them sometimes fully naked because they're dealing with the heat and the horrific conditions that they have to live in. But that's what's on our streets. I take no judgment on those people. I place all judgment on the establishment that are imploding our economy and forcing people into these dire situations. If you go to this section of the on-ramp for the HOV lane on 59 South, what you'll see is the homelessness. You'll see drug needles. You'll see bottles filled with urine. You'll see cardboard boxes of homes. You'll see prostitutions. You'll see these migrants coming over. Where do those migrants go at night? Whose houses, whose backyards are they going in? Right? How many hypodermic needles are being thrown in our parking lots to be stepped on, to be for us to trip on? Okay, is that what Rodney Ellis is talking about? These are the questions of our time, and these are the dark times that the Texas Democrats are bringing to us. And this is the Chris Heasley Show. And on this show, we will bring you all of the ideas, the information, the content that you need to take back your city, your country, your town, your county, your village, your borough. Because the truth is that activism at the local level, it gives you the best bang for your buck. And by taking back the country, we're going to do it at the local level. You know, one of the things that we like to do is we like to talk about Joe Biden. But the truth is, your Texas Democrats, it's like we have 100 Joe Bidens, and they're all local. They're all living in our neighborhoods. So we need to shift our attention from critiquing Joe Biden to critiquing our local Texas Democrats. And on today's show, we have Lana Centzone. Did I pronounce that right? Centzone. Lana Centzone, and she is Republican candidate for Congressional District 18, and we're going to talk to her about all of these matters. And we have G2 on the line. G2, are you there?
I am.
Ah, great. Excellent. Good deal. Well, there you go. You have my opening monologue. I kind of went, I think I was just really blatantly honest about what we're doing. You know, I have to drive to that on-ramp, 59 South, the on-ramp at West Belfort to the HOV lane. I have to drive through that, and I have my children in the car.
Right.
And they have to see this scene that is today's America. And that's something that I didn't have to grow up with. That's something that G2 didn't have to grow up with. And what kind of an effect is that having on our children when they see these homeless people in the most dire situations out on the street? You know, what kind of effect are they having on us? And I want to make the point that's all brought to us by the Texas Democrats. That's the worldview that they have. They never have foundational changes that need to happen to fix our world. They always have a political game. And so, Lana, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. What do you think about what I said? Am I spot on, or am I missing something?
Well, Chris, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so happy that you have invited me to just share my heart with the audience out there. As we know, we are in a spiritual battle, right? Every day we get up and we can make good decisions or bad decisions. You may have a sibling who one will go the right way, the other one ends up doing things like crimes. It's because of the fact that we are in a spiritual battle and we have to make good choices. So choose the right pathway. Go be on God's side. The second thing is Biden has opened up our borders. Our borders are being flooded, especially with young men. At first, the American people were saying, oh, they're coming to work. Okay, come the right way. Apply and come in and come the right way. But now we're seeing a lot of our young women are being killed by these young men. We've got to stop this. We've got to secure our borders. We've got to make sure that our citizens are being protected. And we've got to do something with our open borders. This has gone on too long, and it's time to make changes. It's time to elect officials that will protect the American people and not think about their own pockets and not think about their own selves. Also, with Sylvester Turner, he doesn't agree with ICE. Come on. We've got to secure our borders. We've got to secure the American people. If we're not going to support our police, we're not going to support ICE, which helps with our borders, then what's going on? We've got to elect people who will protect the American people.
Okay, great. And I want to just let the audience know that Lana, again, what congressional district is it that you're running
18.
Running for Congressional District 18. And that district was held by Sheila Jackson Lee for a lifetime.
Yes.
And now Sheila Jackson Lee is passed, so your opponent is
Sylvester Turner. Okay. And so when Lana is talking about Sylvester Turner and ICE, and of course what ICE does is they're our federal agency that does immigration enforcement. Okay, they're the ones that make sure they're the ones that we're relying on to get this human trafficking element out of our midst. And so when she does that, when she talks about ICE and Sylvester Turner said that Houston will not assist ICE agents with immigration raids. So there you have it. Clearly, Sylvester Turner supports this migratory invasion on our southern border. G2, are you on the line?
I am.
G2, does Sylvester Turner have it right when he says that when he was mayor of Houston, and he says that he will not support ICE in raids for illegal immigration?
Well, that's, of course, something we're seeing everywhere. You mentioned a moment ago that you drive through your neighborhood and you see these sites on the sidewalk, sites that we really never saw before. You know, people laying in their own feces, people urinating all over the sidewalks, their drugs, and people walking around. I don't know if you've seen the zombie thing where they're walking all bent over and they can't even stand upright and they just sort of sway back and forth. We didn't have these scenes a few years ago. A few years ago, none of that was normal. But now it doesn't matter whether you're in Houston or whether you're in Baltimore or Chicago or Dallas. You're going to find those scenes in every part of the country. So this has been a very purposeful transition. And what you mentioned, you know, not enforcing those policies of arresting people that are committing crimes, which we've seen in all those cities. The policies of refusing to defend the United States border, which has allowed both north and south flows of people from around the world, and we don't know who they are. Think of this. Since the Democrats seized control in 2021, we've had 10.5 million people come across the border that were encountered by Customs and Border Patrol. Now, CBP, they encountered 10.5 million, but they estimate now that almost 2 million are what they call gotaways. Those are people that either Customs couldn't catch or that they didn't even bother to try to chase. That's at least 2 million. Those are called known gotaways. Then you've got the unknown gotaways. Now, the gotaways are all people who specifically, purposefully eluded law enforcement and our Border Patrol. But those gotaways, about 2 million, the unknown gotaways, that could be another million or two. We don't know because they got away and they weren't encountered and they weren't even seen. Those people are about 70% military-aged men, maybe more now. And they're coming from the Chinese Communist Party, and they're coming from Tren de Aragua down in Venezuela, and they're coming from MS-13 and, the Zetas. So what we have now, think about this, about, I don't know, let's say 6 to 9 months ago, we got these first reports that the Venezuelan brutal gang named Tren was showing up in New York. And then we heard a few weeks later they were showing up in Chicago. And this week we see them taking rifles to people's doors and taking over apartment buildings, demanding in Colorado, in Aurora, Colorado, demanding that the tenants now pay rent, not to the landlord, not to the management company, but rather to this Venezuelan gang. This is a systematic undermining of the United States. Now you could say, well, it's incompetent or a lack of organization or government's just inept. But it's not just happening here. It's England, France, Germany, Greece. It's all over Western civilization. So what you're talking about and your whole opening discussion was a party that is specifically working to destroy Western civilization and succeeding. We are losing now a minimum 75,000 people a year to fentanyl, a drug that comes from the Chinese Communist Party to the cartels, then across the border, and it is delivered nationwide with these cartels. Since the Democrats seized control, we've got 300,000 dead Americans and no actions taken. Our government refuses to serve its highest purpose, defense of the nation. They refuse to defend our border. It's not accidental. It's a policy. It's not chaos at the border. It's a policy, and it's being executed to perfection. How do we know? Bodies all over the country dying from fentanyl, children being raped every night. And now, if you've seen recent reports, that number's in the hundreds of thousands that have been trafficked into the U.S. And then the zombies that are inhabiting our cities, walking around in a stupor. If we don't change this direction in November, if we don't change the direction that these radicals in Congress have us on, including the work of Sheila Jackson Lee, and I'm sure her replacement Democrat would do the same thing, if we don't change that direction, we will lose this nation. It will be unrecognizable in just 5 more years of this.
Well, we have Lana in the office to do something about that, to make sure that it's not a Democrat replacement of that office seat. But since we mentioned Sheila Jackson Lee, we have to acknowledge that she was absolutely fighting with everything that she had for a migratory invasion on our southern border as well, because in the Democrat Party, it is their agenda, and they're loyal to their agenda first, all of them. It's in unison. I'm going to give you a quote that she had. There was a law called SB 147 that was being implemented by the state of Texas that would limit certain foreign countries and foreign entities from being able to buy land in Texas. And here's what Sheila Jackson Lee had to say about it. She said, quote, "There should be no distance that you should not be willing to travel to stop our hatred. No distance. But I wanted, as a member of the U.S. Congress, I wanted you to hear the impression of the federal government and the importance of Texans standing up against SB 147, unquote, Sheila Jackson Lee." And so what Sheila Jackson Lee is saying is that if the idea that American citizens should be able to buy land, that if the American lands should be reserved for Americans, that if you believe that as an American, that you are filled with hate, that makes you some sort of a racist. Clearly, she saw more of an alignment with the migrants coming over the border than she did with her own constituents. So, Lana, what do you think? Do you see that unison across the party regarding the Democrats supporting this migratory invasion?
Absolutely. I remember Sheila Jackson Lee did not want to secure the border. She came against securing the border, and that's wrong. That's wrong. So they're all in cahoots. They're all together, planning to bring down this wonderful country that we love so much. And this is why we have to go out and vote. We have to make a change, and we as American people have to go out and make changes at the polls. You have to get registered to vote, and you have to go out and vote.
Right. So what Lana is saying is that, again, I said at the beginning of the show, because I just started taking this route to go to work, and I started taking this 59 HOV lane, and I'm driving through with my son, and I see this nightmare that is a quarter mile from my home. Okay. And so I see this, and it's frightening. And I just asked the question, what happened? Where do these people go at night? Do they come into my neighborhood? Are they in my backyard? Right. That's the question. What happens when the residents of my neighborhood begin to be assaulted or worse? And the Democrats come to my town and they act like there's nothing, like that we shouldn't even be talking about it. Of course, you heard Sheila Jackson Lee's comment that if this is an issue for you, that you're a bad person. But I want to make this point. It's across the board. Texas Democrats stand with Joe Biden on a migratory invasion of the American Republic, and that means Texas first. Texas gets invaded first before any other state. And Texas Democrats stand in unison. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a quote from, I believe this one is Ann Johnson, State Rep Ann Johnson. I want to confirm that. I believe yes, it is. It is Ann Johnson. I'm going to read this quote from Ann Johnson. Let me pull it up, where she also makes the point that that we should all be standing behind a migratory invasion. Here's her quote. Quote, "The minute you say people who are not citizens don't get the protection of the law enforcement, then they become targets and they become a higher victim population," unquote. So what Ann Johnson's doing now, Americans are being assaulted every day of the week. Americans, what's happening to Americans are being ravaged like never before in our lifetimes. Texans are being ravaged like never before in our lifetimes. And Ann Johnson, Texas Democrat, what she does is she makes a pitch fight in defense of migratory invaders. Okay. We see their interest. The Texas Democrats across the board support a migratory invasion. So G2, how to what extent is this migratory invasion at this point? Like, how many of these people are coming over, and have the Democrats, have they offered up any kind of a defense of Americans in this what we're going through?
So let me put this in perspective. Ellis Island operated for 62 years. And in those 62 years, they brought 12 million people through and processed them to be further moving into the United States as immigrants. In the last 4 years since the Democrats seized control of our federal government, we've had, again, 10.5 million of encounters, and we've got 2 million of gotaways, known gotaways. Plus, we have the unknown gotaways. So you're telling me, wait a minute, in 4 years, we've brought in more illegal aliens, unknown, unprocessed, than came in over 62 years through Ellis Island. That's not a system of controlled immigration. That is a system of an invasion. Again, we know that 70% of them are military-age men, and you've seen the arrangements that the Chinese Communist Party made to move Chinese from Ecuador up through the Darien Gap in Panama and up to the border of Texas. They have a series of supply depots and processing centers. There is a special channel for the Chinese, and the Chinese, sent here by the Communist Party, they pay a fee to the cartels between $20,000 and $35,000. Now, the average Chinese citizen probably isn't sitting on $20,000 to $35,000 to come in. So where are these military-aged Chinese men coming from? Well, again, they're coming from the CCP. All right, so we're saying 12.5 million. The same number that came through Ellis Island in 62 years came here in 4. That is greater than the population of 11 states. That is 1.5 times the population of the Houston metropolitan statistical area, the greater Houston community, which I think is about 8 million now. It's 1.5 times the city of Houston. It is 3 times the size of Cleveland. It is, well, and if you just look at Cleveland proper, not the MSA, it's 10 times the size. So when you think about this, we brought in an entire state. Pennsylvania is 12 million people. That's how many of known gotaways and encounters we've had. Yeah, this isn't just simply some people that want to come in to pick fruit or work in chicken factories. This is a full-on invasion. Now, why are they coming? It was announced in Oregon this week on a flyer put out by something called the Hacienda Community Development Corporation that they were making $30,000 grants available to non-citizens. Now, the way they did their flyer, it said non-citizens. When there was this flyer, obviously was met with outrage. And when it was met with outrage, they changed it and said, oh, no, it's available to both citizens and non-citizens. But the reality is only non-citizens are getting it. There are 5 criteria you have to meet. Well, you have to meet two of 5 criteria in order to qualify for these grants. One of those 5 criteria is not being able to speak English well and feeling that you've been discriminated against because English is not your first language. Another is you've been discriminated against because of your citizenship status. In other words, because you're an illegal alien, you have not maybe been able to get a job or you haven't been able to be voting. You feel discriminated against. If you meet those 2 criteria, you can get a $30,000 grant that citizens are not getting so that you can buy a home that citizens can no longer afford. This is an attack on the American people. It's an attack on the American nation, and it's being led by these radical globalists, the Democrats, that now have control of our federal government.
Lana, is there anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I think that's insanity. That is insanity. When you think about Ellis Island, the amount of people who came over on Ellis Island and the 4 years of the Biden administration equals the same amount of time with Ellis Island. Do you want to have another 4 years of that? That's another 12 million people. That's insanity. We've got to make changes. This cannot happen under our watch. We've got to make changes as American citizens.
Well, the one thing I like to point out is that the Democrat Party, it always presents, the Texas Democrats, they always present themselves as the defender of the little guy, the defender of the minority. Of course, when they do that, it's a divisionary tactic where they're saying one half of America is bad. Of course, that's not good to do that. And then they're saying the other half is a victim. It's a divide and conquer tactic. And I think it's time for all Americans to rise up against that. But again, getting back to the point, they say that they are the defender of the minority, and they say that they are the defender of our black Americans, okay? They say this over and over again, but the truth is that this migratory invasion will replace, they are coming here to replace our jobs, and they're going to penetrate the black and Latino working class first. They will take them out first. And that is what your Texas Democrats are working to make happen. They're working to make sure that this migratory invasion replaces our working class Americans, largely minority. And so I like to point that out. But now what I'm going to do, But however, Sylvester Turner presents a completely different message. Okay, and the message he presents is I'm following his Twitter feed, and what he did is he retweeted a Kamala or a Kamala fan group tweet where it's a quote, and it says, "The Biden-Harris administration has created 2.5 million jobs for Black Americans. They've achieved the lowest unemployment rate for Black Americans, brought down the gap between Black and white employment, and invested $16 billion in HBCUs." So everything we're seeing on the streets is hyperinflation. We're seeing unemployment. We're seeing an economy propped up with funny money, with extra printing of cash by the Fed. That's a house of cards going to crash. We see a migratory invasion replacing our workforce. But according to Sylvester Turner, we are all, don't believe your eyes. Don't believe your eyes. He's got the statistics and everything is just fine. Lana, what's your response for that?
Well, we know that the Democrats love to buy votes, right? So the African Americans and the Hispanics, they'll go into the low income community and show them and say, "Oh, I'll give you this and I'll do this for you." But yet still, when they get into office, they don't do it, right? And over, we've seen that year after year after year. Guess what? The Black Americans and the Hispanics are waking up, and they're realizing that they've been taken advantage of all these years. And they're saying, come on, the Democrats make all these promises and they never fulfill them. But the Republicans, guess what? They say one thing and they're going to do what they say that they're going to do. So they're believing that the Republicans are really on their side.
Yeah, I think there is a red pill thing happening within our minority communities. I read that, of course, in the early 1900s and the late 1800s, Black Americans were overwhelmingly Republican. I've read that we are near those levels of support for the America First agenda today as it was back then. So I think that we're watching a transition. G2, what about those stats that Sylvester Turner retweeted? That the unemployment is in a really good shape for Black Americans. They've got jobs, their income's up. How do you interpret that? Is Sylvester Turner on the mark, or is there some funny business in that message?
Well, first I'll address that, and then I'll tell you the promise that the Democrats are definitely going to keep if they continue to control government. First of all, on those statistics, if you paid attention to the employment numbers that have been reported over the last, say, 4 years.
Hey, G2, we got a call. You mean I'm going to try to take this call. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
I don't know if I know how. It went away. Goodness, you got the floor. Hey, if you want to call in again, please call in. But G2, you got the floor.
What these employment numbers have shown is an incredible.
1 second, we got the caller back. I'm gonna try. Caller, are you on the air? Oh wait, I'm sorry. I don't. Okay, it's not happening. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hey, I'm looking for opinions to take us on. So go ahead.
What these employment numbers have shown is a steady increase in employment and a very large increase in the number of people in our workforce in this nation. Now, of course, we know that when they count jobs created, they're starting at the bottom when the lockdowns were in place and people were basically forcibly moved out of their jobs. That recovery of those jobs was a part of this that I don't give anyone credit for. They simply stopped oppressing us and forcing us out of work. But if you look at the job numbers that have accrued since then, and you dig below the surface, what you find is we still have fewer full-time jobs than we had then. The growth has all been in part-time jobs. In fact, I think the deficit in full-time jobs is 1.6 million. And they're counting part-time jobs as a job. In other words, if you're a carpenter or a bricklayer or a computer technician or a programmer and you lose your job and you go take a job, say, at a gas station and a Dairy Queen, that is one job minus and two jobs plus. That's considered net job growth. Now, you don't have the benefit package and the income you had. You can't support your family anymore. But the statistics look great. So that's where we get this phrase, the economy's doing great. It's the people in it that are suffering, right? So you look at these statistics, they sound fantastic. Now, we also know that the government has had to make very significant adjustments to these employment numbers. it's always the case that there's a little adjustment here as final numbers come in. They might increase a wee bit or decrease a wee bit. They have eliminated 1.2 million of these fake jobs. What I mean by fake jobs is they never existed. The numbers coming out of the government are fake. The last adjustment downward was 818,000 jobs eliminated. And here's another problem with the jobs numbers. A large portion of the jobs that have been created are in government. Now, a nation that's run at a $2 trillion deficit ought not be hiring more government workers. So these jobs numbers are so skewed and so corrupted that you cannot use them and rely on them. You have to look at what's happening to the American people. And we've talked on your show before about how inflation has risen faster than people's wages. So while the actual dollars they get paid have gone up, what they can buy with those dollars is actually significantly lower now than when the Democrats seized control. Now, that's a hit of about $3,800 to $4,000 for the average family. Median income in this country is $79,000 to $75,000. Depending on where you live, it could be a little below $75,000. Let's just call it $75,000. You're going to take a $4,000 hit because your wages on average have not kept up with inflation. But wait, there's more. With the increases that the Fed implemented to try to stop inflation, driven by this crazy government spending, not by corporate greed, by the crazy, irresponsible government spending. If you take the interest burden that the average family's taken on, that's another $4,000. So the average family with a median income of about $75,000 has lost $8,000 of purchasing power since they removed Donald Trump from office, since the Democrats seized control. That's an economic disaster. So we're looking at GDP growth and these great employment numbers. We say the economy's great. Yeah, but the people aren't getting it. It's not coming through to the American people. So this is why, first of all, we have to change policies. Now, here's the promise the Democrats are going to keep. If they continue to control the White House, and if they get people, if they control the House and the Senate, and that is this: they are preparing to grant citizenship to all illegal aliens. We're talking about somewhere between 15 and 20 million people that will be granted citizenship, and that means 20 million more voters. Of course, they're confident that they're going to vote Democrat. They've also started something called the Welcome Corps, where an illegal alien can now bring in 5 people from his family or his community back in his home country. He's not a citizen. She's not a citizen, but they can reach back into their home country and bring in 5 more. That's called the Welcome Corps. You'll find Catholic Charities deeply involved. Catholic Charities is making significant amounts of money trafficking people across the border. They're going to keep the promise that this invasion is not only going to continue, it is going to accelerate. They're going to increase the incentives, free citizenship, immediate citizenship, and they're going to continue to keep the border undefended. This nation, with 4 more years of this, will be transformed and unrecognizable. What you talk about seeing on your way to work, we're going to be seeing that everywhere. These gangs that are seizing apartment buildings and demanding that the rent be paid to them instead of the owner, that's going to become commonplace. This nation is under assault. And if we don't stop these policies, we won't recover. And that's why it's important we get people in Congress who are willing to fight, and we take these radical Democrats out. So, Lana, I'm glad to hear that you're running, and I hope that you're successful, because we need people like you who are willing to plant their feet and fight for their communities, for their state, for their nation, for their families, in order to turn this corner.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You know what? I want to address those guys the gangs that's in Colorado. You know what? That's insanity. Why would they allow them to make these people take American citizens' money? These people should be deported immediately. Immediately. If you know this is going on, then get them out of this country. To send them back to the country that they belong. They don't belong here. If they're coming here to destroy American values and American people, get them out. The other thing is inflation is so high. We're seeing moms and dads getting 2-3 jobs just to make ends meet. We're even seeing older generations where they should be relaxing and enjoying life, going back into the workforce. And this is what they're counting as jobs being created. These are not jobs being created. These are people who are struggling, and they're trying to make ends meet. So this is time for change, people. Come on, make changes. This is time for change.
So what I did to prep for the show, because Sylvester Turner's running for that office against Lana, is I went to his Twitter feed, and I just took a look at his Twitter feed. And what you see there is you don't see anything about the issues. What he likes to do is he likes to pat the back of fellow Democrats if, they had something in their life, an event, a career, a retirement party, or he's always patting the back of fellow Democrats. Or he'll do an occasional, something on like a historical event or something like that. But he never talks about the issues. And what I see with these Democrats, because again, I'm looking for their content. I'm looking for their content because I want to quote them, because their quotes at this point are so absurd. Their agenda is so absurd. I just need to quote them. I just need to read one of their quotes and present it to the audience. And there's almost no quotes from Sylvester Turner. Right? You look at it's all fluff on his Twitter feed. And it's the same thing with most of these Texas Democrats. And of course, we all want to get him in a debate, but they're never going to do it. If Sylvester Turner was sitting in this audience right now, he's paper thin deep on intelligence. He wouldn't last. I mean, I would like to think that I'm fairly certain that he wouldn't last a second in these debates, because here we are talking about all the issues, immigration and fentanyl and all of these things. And when you look at his Twitter feed, it's all about birthday parties and, and things of that sort. And so what I'm trying to say is this, I'm going to ask you both. Do you see these Democrats sort of running from the issues at this point? Go ahead, Lana.
Well, we can see with Kamala Harris, right? She has no issues. Still on her website, there are no issues that she says that she's going to fight for American citizens. So if it's coming from the top, what do you expect for everybody else?
And half the time what Sylvester Turner is doing is he's retweeting Kamala Harris or her Kamala Harris fan groups. But there is one guy I see who actually does fight for these issues, and it's Gene Wu. I mean, he at least will go out there. I mean, I disagree with everything of his platform, but he's like the only one that will go out there and present their agenda. But the rest of them they're just running from it. G2, what do you think?
When you listen to Kamala Harris now beginning to talk about building a border wall, no tax on tips, and other points that she's making, she's actually now somewhat adopting Donald Trump's platform. She, of course, voted against the border wall years ago. When you look at what they had in their Democrat convention, which was a shocking display, they had for the first time country music. They had flags on stage. They haven't had flags on stage in recent conventions as I remember. So they're starting now to try to appeal to voters. I think the situation now is that they know that so many of us are aware of the policies that Sheila Jackson, that the rest of these folks have put in place, that they know they've got to run from them. They know they've got to not talk about these. They know that if they replace Sheila Jackson with Sylvester Turner, they're going to get the same policies. So the Democrat Party, including Walz, Harris, and the other prominent candidates, and of course, also including Sylvester Turner, in many cases are trying to sound more like normal Americans who want a nation that's free and prosperous and safe and secure. Well, of course, that's not anything that they believe in, but they need to seize power again. They need to maintain this grip so they can continue the attack on America. Yeah, I don't think there's anything sincere about any pro-American policy they put in place, but Harris wrote down her immigration plan. It really is the invasion we're seeing today, but on a much higher, much more rapid path. She wrote that down. We're not making that up or sort of dreaming it in some fever dream. She wrote it down. I don't know why anybody would write this down, but she did. So on one hand, they don't want to talk about issues. I think Trump's done 40 interviews in the last 40 days, something like that. He's done interviews that are multiple hours of interviews, unscripted. She's done one 18-minute interview with a Democrat operative, Dana Bash, that was scripted, edited, and she had a chaperone with her. They are hiding from themselves. They're trying to hide themselves from us because they know the American people are figuring out. I'll tell you that I believe that right now, Donald Trump and the conservatives that are trying to restore American security, that are trying to restore the American Constitution, I think we're at least 5 to 10% ahead in the presidential race. I set the polls aside. A lot of voters don't get polled. And if you look at polls on other things, not the presidential race, you start seeing some numbers emerge that support this idea. I think it's 5 to 10% ahead. The Democrats are panicked. The Harris-Walz handlers, whoever it is that controls them, panicked. So they're trying to appeal to us by sounding as if they don't hate this country. But don't be fooled. Look at the policies. Look at the actions. Look what they've done. They want this country permanently transformed, and they're not going to stop unless we stop them.
So if you look at this show, what we talked about today, we talked about homelessness. We talked about the fentanyl at the border. We've talked about inflation, Fed policy, so on and so forth. But one of the issues that you'll find Sylvester Turner is really passionate about is homosexuality. And this is across the Democrat Party. While Americans are hunkered down and weighed down in the we're in the weight of everyday life, paying our bills in a hyperinflation era, a depressed economy, our domestic oil supply is eroding. For some reason, with the Democrat Party, the Texas Democrat, homosexuality, for some reason, it tops all of those issues because that's in Fort Bend County, they are regularly having homosexual celebrations. And I don't understand why it's a driving imperative for Texas Democrats to have more homosexuality in Texas. It makes no sense to me. In my opinion, sexual preferences are a personal matter, and we should have no agenda to drive that issue in one way or the other. Just let people be. That's for private moments. But it is clearly, and so for Sylvester Turner, in 2015, Turner was named one of the top 10 best members of the Texas House on LGBT issues by Equality Texas with an A+ rating. So, and here's another Texas Democrat that really wants to drive home homosexuality. And I think this is why I think they do it. I think they're trying to drown out the true culture of Texas, which is the spirit of 1836, the Battle of the Alamo. And I think that they're trying to drown that out and replace that with sort of that make homosexuality the new driving issue in the state of Texas. That's what it appears to me. I don't know, but Lana, I'm going to ask you, why is Sylvester Turner so passionate about homosexuality?
Well, that's really a question for him. But I do have to say that with homosexuality, that's an adult issue. But when you go into a school and you introduce that to little children who are 5, 6, 7 years old, no, you're hitting home with me with that. That's not for children. Children should be learning about, playing with dolls, learning about sharing with other kids, learning about math, English, the normal topics. But that should not be an issue for children. So that's actually for adults, but not for children.
G2, what do you think? Is Sylvester Turner trying to push homosexuality on the people of Texas?
Well, I don't know about his specific policies, but I can tell you this. Everywhere that I see Democrats seizing control of school boards or government, for some reason they begin to focus on sexuality in a way that is just unnatural for government. It is unnatural for government to be spending so much time telling its citizens how they should be, how they should treat people. This isn't the role of government to talk about sexuality all day. And Lana, to your point, when you go into a school today, you will see these rainbow flags. Well, they're not talking about, pots of gold at the end of a rainbow. They're talking about marketing homosexuality and sexual issues to children. I say marketing because if you go into some schools today, I saw one a couple of years ago in a middle school, there were flags everywhere, posters about sexuality everywhere, billboards about sexuality throughout the building. It was incredible, the amount of marketing that was being done. Now, what's the impact of that? Well, New Jersey is rife with this. They've had a 4,000% increase in students in school who identify as, quote, non-binary, unquote. So this is having an unnatural impact on people. Now, this community of teachers and politicians that are obsessed with getting children involved in drag shows and getting children involved in sex parades in towns like San Francisco. This is not normal. This is not acceptable. And as they try to make it seem normal and acceptable, I think we see one of the darker elements of this devious, evil agenda. You know, to your point, Lana, let's leave the adult issues to adults. Let's leave the child pornography out of schools. And for those that don't know, yes, there is child pornography in many, many schools. It's well documented. Let's leave the teachers talking about math, not talking about their personal sexual journey. That's not appropriate for a middle school teacher to be talking to an eighth grader about, right? Let's leave the adult issues, as you said, to the adults. Let's get the schools out of the sexuality business. Let's get the government out of the sexuality business. Let's just let the government fulfill its narrow set of responsibilities, the ones that it often ignores, defending the nation, for example. And let's let the schools focus on education, math and science and history. Let's get them teaching again instead of grooming our children.
Right. I mean, what I would like to hear, I would like Democrats to return to their roots. And what I'd like to hear Texas Democrats talk about is industry, about protecting local industry, about lowering taxes, about restoring our currency, about building our troops up, but bringing them home. That's the sort of things that Democrats used to be about. And today, their issues are diversity, sexuality, and then they just run from and their issues are also about Democrats. They're always tweeting about celebrating each other's birthdays or whatever, but there's not much content out there that is substantive from the Texas Democrats. So, Lana, we're going to close out here. You have the floor. Just tell me what do you intend to achieve with should you attain office?
So just to say a little bit about the Democrats, we know that they have an agenda, right? And their agenda is to change the minds of our children. Their agenda is to bring in and bring down this country. But my agenda and my goal and my hope is to build up Texas, is to build up Houston, is to bring in new small businesses. So those who are struggling can now build something for themselves and build wealth. Is for me to have children who are being taught the right things in school. My agenda, my hope is for ending this border, people coming over the border and ending human trafficking. You know, there are 30,000 children who are missing that came over the border. Why? Why is this happening? So to build up this community, to build up our community, to end inflation, to build up and let our economy grow again. But guys, it's time for change and it's time for us to do it. So my heart is for the community and my heart is for the people.
G2, do you have anything to add? Lana just spelled out what her intentions are when she gets into office. What would you add to that?
Well, I think what you're spelling out as your intentions are the things that the American voter, the American citizen, now has to start holding its elected officials accountable for. We should have never allowed someone with the radical agenda of a Sheila Jackson Lee to be in office as long as she has. That's a failure of the American voter. It's a failure of the American citizen not doing the job they're supposed to do. It's time to turn a corner. So the policy positions that you are taking are the ones that I advocate for everywhere I go. If those are the policy positions you are going to actually fight for and implement, well, then I hope you're successful in this campaign. Because I can tell you the Democrats, they're dedicated to this destruction of the United States program they've been running for these last 4 years. They're not changing course. They're not slowing down. They're going to accelerate.
Right.
So it is time for a change.
You know, did you want to say something, Lana?
No. I agree. It's time for change. And the only way we can have change is if the American people get out and vote and make change.
I'm going to just finish up.
Yep.
You know, again, that on-ramp. I'm sorry I keep talking about it, but it was traumatic event for me. I have to take my family through that every day. My children see this. It's the 59 on-ramp at West Belford. And that is right on the border of Fort Bend County and Harris County. And, you know, the Texas Democrats, they walk through these counties as if they're celebrities, as if they are the people that are fighting for our interests. And I think that it's time that we don't allow them to do that any longer. Those people, and again, I pass no judgment on the homeless people. None. They didn't do it. The economic situation that we're in is so oppressive. I don't believe this is a time for judging, except for judging Texas Democrats. And I think it's time that all Texans do that, because when you drive through that area, that is the result of the poverty pimps. And the Texas Democrats do not intend to fix that situation. They don't intend to bring back America to greatness once again. They intend for all of us to be in those homeless camps that are only building, growing, and spreading. We need to reclaim our cities, our towns. We need to reclaim our neighborhoods. We need to no longer accept the fact that we live next to a neighborhood that is a war zone. That neighborhood that is a war zone was at one point in time a nice, quiet neighborhood. And that's what our vision has to be for all of Harris County, all of Fort Bend County, for the whole state of Texas. And with that being said, this is the Chris Heasley Show. I appreciate all of your time. We will be here next week at the same time. Have a great week.